Okay, so in the last video of the series here, we are going to go over hosting. Now in this video, we're only going to be hosting the Gatsby version of the site. Now that's not because the other ones aren't important, it's mostly because that's the only one that you can't find a whole lot of information on elsewhere. For instance, Next.js, this is the platform the front end of our site is written in. They have a whole section in their README on hosting. If we come down here, we can, let's go hosting, let's find this. You can see that we can host production deployment directly in the Now service, and it works very, very well. And once you do that, there's no caveats. This thing's going to work the exact same on your desktop as it does on production, right? So you'll be able to host this thing no problem using something like the Now service. However, there is also other ways that you can host this on any sort of node service, but it is a little bit more like if you want to host your next site, this Now service is a great way to do it. And if you want to make sure that everything connects okay in your actual code, really the only thing you have to change is in the config. You remember we had our next.config file, which had our exports, but we also had our config.js, which simply just set the API URL. So in this case, you would simply just change your API URL to the live site and push it up. And this thing's going to function correctly. Again, that's the Now service. I would recommend checking that out, but there is full documents on that in the next.js. Now, as far as hosting your WordPress site, this can be done on any WordPress host. It can even be done on WordPress.com, which is sort of a non-file system access to WordPress, right? And that could be a great way to get your site hosted for free, at least the back end of it, considering this is just an API. In addition to WordPress.com, you could also host on any cheap shared server, something like maybe Bluehost.com. If you feel like supporting the channel, go ahead and click on one of those Bluehost links in the video descriptions on YouTube for level up tutorials. That would greatly help us if you want a cheap host for hosting your WordPress site. But as far as hosting an actual WordPress goes, there's quite a bit involved in actually moving the database. And oftentimes, you're more likely to use something like a plugin like what we have installed here, like WP Migrate Pro. Now, again, there's tons of tutorials on WP Migrate Pro and that sort of thing for moving your database. If you want a more modern hosting option, you can always fire up a DigitalOcean droplet and sync your site with Git, but you'll still need a solution like WP Migrate Pro if you plan on migrating the local database to the production database. Again, this sort of stuff is a little bit out of the scope of this course because it's so WordPressy or it's so Next.js-y. The only thing I want to cover really specifically in hosting is hosting our Gatsby site, because this is the one that when you push it up and you make changes, you're not going to see those changes happening without a rebuild. So in this video, what we want to do is get this Gatsby version of this site up and hosted so that we can trigger a rebuild anytime you make a new post, and talk a little bit about that workflow and why it's unique. So to do that, we first need to change directory into our project. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to make sure that I'm in the root of the Gatsby project. And from here, I'm going to do git init. And then I'm going to git add period. Then I'm going to git commit -m initial commit. Okay. And now let's go ahead, and this is pretty much it. There's already a git ignore file in here, so we don't really need to do too much else other than that. I'm going to head to GitHub here, and I'm going to make a new repo. Let me head over to change my profile to be Level Up Tutorials. We're going to create a new repo, and this will be WP Gatsby. Okay, and we're going to keep this public, whatever, create the repository. We're going to use this to do a git remote add origin, git remote add origin. Sorry for breezing through this stuff. I'm kind of assuming that you already know the standard git workflow, because that's not really the focus of this course here. So let's go ahead and git push origin master now and get this thing up onto GitHub. That's the most important part, is just getting this all up onto GitHub, and here we go. Here's our site. Okay, so now we're ready to get started hosting the Gatsby version of the site. Now, because Gatsby is going to require some sort of live data source, I did create a blog here on a sort of spare domain I had sitting around. This is called the wholemind.me. You could probably use this API too if you just want to try this out in yours. So we're going to need to, one, use this, but two, we're going to need to make some modifications to our platform. Because at this point, even if you tried to have built your Gatsby site, if we were to try to run the Gatsby build command, you would see some errors. Not to mention, if you were to check your terminal lately, you might be seeing some errors in here too. And let's talk a little bit about those errors. Now, again, if you did the Pro Gatsby course, you may already know what the problem is. You may have already solved that problem yourself. Now, if you haven't or don't know what the problem is, I'm going to tell you really quick so you do not run into this same thing. Okay, so everything is good here. We're creating our pages. But if we were to run this build command, it would fail. It would say that the slug is not getting into the page. Now, why would that be? Well, the reason why is because Gatsby automatically builds every page in Pages. It automatically builds them. So we're building a page, and that page is going to get automatically built as page, and it's going to try to load this query, but it's not going to have any context. So that's all happens before this stuff happens, right? So what we need to do is move our page and post out of this folder. So to do that, I'm going to create a new folder, and we're going to call this templates. Okay, now inside of templates, let me just open these up in Finder here, Reveal in Finder. I'm going to drag and drop and move both page and post.js into templates. So this is step one here. We need to get any sort of dynamically created page out of Pages, or else the build is not going to work. Okay, so now obviously we need to update this code that says pages to templates. Okay, this is a Gatsby -node. Okay, so this is step one to making sure this thing is going to host correctly. Okay, now step two is, well, we need to head to our Gatsby config where we had our URL, because we want to be pointing this to a live site URL. Now, again, I did say that I created this wholemind.me quick WordPress install here. This is going to be the URL of the API that you're connecting to. Now, this is just a fresh WordPress install, but it should connect to this no problem. Now, the last step here is we want to add the Gatsby plugin Netlify. If we head to our command line, we can do yarn add Gatsby plugin Netlify. So you're already getting some little errors here, and the thing crashed. We'll rerun this in a second here after we install this new plugin. Okay, so that's installed. We'll do Gatsby plugin Netlify. Okay, so with those three things, we had to change the base URL in our options. We had to add the Netlify plugin, and we had to make sure that any page is not going to get some weird duplication, because if we try to build this on a real server and there's errors, the build's going to fail and your site's not going to go up. Let's go ahead and rerun Gatsby develop here now that this is should be good. All the changes have been made, and we should see no more errors. Okay, it looks like everything is great. No more errors. So now at this point, we can do git add dot git commit. Let's have a real commit message here. Updated config. Okay, and we can do a git push origin master. Push this up to GitHub, and we should be good to go for hosting now. So let's check this thing out. Now let's head to our Netlify. Now, again, I love Netlify. It's a great service. Even though they sponsor the Syntax podcast, it's what I use to host a ton of stuff on. So if you want to help support this channel, you can head to netlify.com/level up and sign up and let them know that you came from this series. You don't have to do it, but it would help out the Level Up Tutorials channel a lot. Okay, so from here, we're going to go ahead and select login or sign up, depending on what you need to do. I usually log in with my GitHub account, so that way when you get to here, we can do a new site from Git, select GitHub, and then it's automatically going to authorize you, right? You don't have to do anything more. So now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and select Level Up Tuts. From here, I'm going to look for WP. I'm going to hit Enter, and I'm going to select WP Gatsby. Now, here's just part of the wonderful thing about Netlify. It understands that this is a Gatsby site, and it knows to run Gatsby build when I click Deploy. And anytime I make updates to the repo, it's automatically going to rerun a deploy command. So Netlify is doing a ton of stuff for us here, and it's going to make this process really easy. So let's check it out here as we push this up, and hopefully once this deploys, this should be good to go. Okay, check it out. We are now getting some green published. If we select this, we should see our Gatsby site. Yay, it's not beautiful by any means, but hey, it works. It's lightning fast, as Gatsby tends to be, and it's pretty beautiful in my opinion. Okay, so let's talk about one of the main pieces of beef now with this system. Remember, every single page we create is going to go up into our main nav. You can't see it, but the sample page is here. It's just purple. And if we were to come to our WordPress backend, let's do WP admin. Let's get in here. And we were to create a new page. Let's go ahead and say add new page. New page. Now in a standard WordPress page or WordPress install, you could just say, hey, publish. Not to mention if you were in a Next.js site, this would work fine too. And you were to head back to your site and you would expect this to be here. And it's not. Not only that, but, Netlify doesn't seem to be aware of anything. There's been no changes. There's been no rebuilds, because that's how Gatsby works. It requires a rebuild whenever there's new content, and because of that, it's not the sort of instant feedback that you're used to with WordPress. Now, the bummer about that is hey, it's not instant feedback, but the positives are this site is so lightning fast that, hey, as long as your people who are editing the site know those downfalls, then, this kind of lightning fast site is not too bad of a thing. So let's talk about what we can do to get this thing updated, right? Because we could always say, come in here into Netlify and say, hey, rebuild this site. But that's not necessarily a great solution. We want to be able to trigger a redeploy anytime we do a post. Now, if you're using WordPress.com, there's a really neat little thing in settings, which is just settings webhooks. There's no settings webhooks in here. That's a little unfortunate. So what we want to do is grab a plugin, and we want to look for plugins. Let's go to add new, and we want to search for webhook. Now, there was a really popular one that I did see a lot of people having issues with. So what we're going to go with in this series is going to be notification custom notifications alerts for WordPress. This thing seems like it's all about notification, but what this is basically the ability to send webhooks. So we're going to install and activate and check this plugin out. Okay, install, activate has the green ad. It looks like it was just updated, so people have been updating and everything. Allow us to improve notification. No, we're going to go ahead and skip that, okay? Now, let's go ahead and actually head to our plugin. So we have notification here. Let's go to notifications in the sidebar, and we're going to select add new notification. And here we're going to add a new webhook. Now, you will need to do a whole bunch of these, right? So it might take a little while to get the setup based on what you want your site to redeploy. There are other options. There are PHP options to send a post request. I figured this was a nice visual way we could do it through the interface. It would work with WordPress.com too. We want to say, hey, we want to redeploy on page publish. Okay, so now we need to select a trigger, and this is the tedious part, is you would need to, basically anytime you want the site to rebuild, you'd have to have a new trigger. So page published. Now, if you have a better webhooks package that you use and love, please, by all means, use that. We're simply just sending a post request. This is one I just found to be reliable and easy. Okay, so page published, and let's scroll down here, and let's head to the webhook, where we can go ahead and check this checkbox, and let's add our actual webhook. And you'll have to select this webhook thing to get this thing open. We're going to add a new URL post. And to find that URL, we have to head to Netlify here. Now, in our Netlify, we just need to go to Site Settings, and then we need to go to Build and Deploy. Let's scroll down here to Build Hooks, where we're going to add a build hook. So we're just going to say redeploy. Okay, save this, and this is giving us a URL. Now, anytime that this URL is hit with a post request, this thing is going to rebuild. So you're going to copy this URL right here, head to our WordPress install. Okay, so we can just post that URL in here and select add URL. Actually, we don't need to select add URL because that just adds another one. But what this is going to do is anytime we publish a post, it's going to send a post request to our URL that we specified, triggering a rebuild. And again, it's not going to be instantaneous, but it should be pretty smooth. We can have a new page in here. Let's go up to Pages, Add New, and we could say should redeploy. Okay, say hey, and let's click Publish. Now, upon publishing, what we should see is we can head back to our Netlify site and let's scroll up and let's go overhead to Overview, and you're going to see something fun, something really fun in my opinion. We get a rebuilding. Now, granted, the Gatsby default starter site isn't going to have our new links in here just yet because it's still building, but give it a second here, and once this finishes building, we're going to be able to refresh and have all those new links in the page. And just like that, let's head back to our site. Let's give it a refresh. And even though this isn't appearing in our menu, this page is still going to have been built. The slug for this page would have been should redeploy, or even one of our other pages, which I believe was just new page. If we head back here and do /new-page, this new page is going to work. It didn't add it to the menu because when we created the menu, or when I created the menu, I should say, I didn't say automatically add new pages, and I wish I would have. But as you can see here, this is now officially rebuilt. We saw the rebuild happen, and we did so with a webhook. Again, if you have better webhook plugins, please by all means use them. Otherwise, you're going to be creating an individual webhook, or you can get into PHP to do it, which is maybe what I would typically do. But again, I wanted to cover all your bases in case you're not working with PHP. Okay, so as always, this is Scott with Level Up Tutorials. I hope you've enjoyed this headless WordPress course. The main takeaways from this course are really that once you have the WP JSON up and running, which is out of the box there, you simply just need to add the plugins you need to pull in the data, and then you can hit this API in all kinds of ways. Now, there's also a really great GraphQL WordPress API package as well for working with normal Apollo sites if you want to throw WordPress API onto literally anything. There's so much stuff in this space, it's really hard to cover. And that's one of the issues I had developing this course was, what is the best way to do everything? So in my opinion, the best way to do everything is to use the Postlight Starter Kit if you are starting from scratch. If you are not starting from scratch, use the Postlight Starter Kit as a basis for setting up your actual WordPress site. Now from there you can go the Next.js route, which is going to have a constantly updated server-side rendered site that you can host anywhere you'd host a Node app. Or you could go with something like Gatsby that might be a little bit more difficult. We have to wait for this build times to go, but the lightning fast speeds are pretty unmatched in this system. Okay, so I hope that helped with everything. Any questions you have with Headless WordPress, if there's any additional topics you'd like to see covered about Headless WordPress, please let me know. There can always be made additions or updates to the site, whether or not it's through the YouTube channel or additions to the series. So thanks so much for watching, and thank you for supporting Level Up Tutorials.